What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. And this week we go international with the UFC once again to Australia, as we have UFC 293 Adesanya versus Sean Strickland. So Israel Adesanya finally gets to defend his championship against somebody not named Alex Pereira, not named Robert Whittaker. This is not a rematch. This is a fresh matchup. So that's something to be excited about, even though it's not the Dricus du Plessis fight that we wanted to see Israel Adesanya take part in. Maybe someday we get that soon, but in the meantime, we've got 12 fights on this card. A lot of local talent from Australia and New Zealand. City Kickboxing guys fill up this card as well. And there's 5 debuting fighters on this card. So a lot of extra tape study to do, kind of like last week with UFC France, where there was a lot of local debuting talent from that area. We get the same thing down under this week. So co-main event between local knockout artist Tuivasa as he takes on Alexander Volkov. That should be a banger. And ultimately a lot of fun matchups on this card too. So I'll point out the bets I have, all the predictions. I do like some props. I do like a couple of money lines, but ultimately going to look to add some more action on here and get some new ideas. So I'm bringing a new guest to the channel this week on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. He's no stranger to the MMA community. Longtime gambler and content creator Bleed MMA will be joining us to break it down. So I can't wait to talk to you guys in the live chat, break into the fights again from a gambling perspective with Bleed, and join me then on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's break into the first fight of the night. First fight of the night at welterweight between two debuting fighters here. The Frenchman Kevin Jousset as he takes on the debuting Irishman Kiefer Crosbie. So these guys could have easily made their debut last week at UFC Paris and fit right in with the rest of the debuting Europeans. But Kevin Jousset is a local guy. He's been training at City Kickboxing for some time now. Rounding out his game, Jousset is a very long and rangy fighter who makes his foundation martial art in judo and jiu-jitsu, but he's rounding it out with the City Kickboxing ways, and now he looks like a pretty competent striker and well-rounded fighter, but he's pretty slow starting in his fights. He's a guy in Jousset who likes to kind of plod forward with flat feet, his hands low, baiting in people for the counter, and he can be really measured and technical with his shot selection, which makes him kind of liable to lose minutes early in round 1 and have to work his way into the fight. But his cardio looks okay. His durability has not been cracked yet besides one doctor stoppage, which is also the same for Kiefer Crosbie. And this guy has more of a complete contrasting style with his striking. Kiefer Crosbie, more of an aggressive boxer who likes to start fast in round 1, close that distance, and get into a firefight, trying to implement those close-range weapons early, the short hooks up close, even grabbing the double collar Muay Thai clinch, tie up and getting those knees to the body, knees up to the head. And the elbows as well are pretty devastating too. One of his higher profile fights for Crosbie was earlier in April of this year against former UFC fighter Alex Cowboy Oliveira, who had a very chaotic fight. Both of these guys threw everything they had, and it was clear one guy was going to go out pretty early in that fight. Happened to be Cowboy Oliveira, who's just old and just kind of a shell of his former self at this point. He got TKO'd by Crosbie at the end of round 1. So this could go one of two ways, right? It could be Crosbie early, likely with the more finishing potential in round 1, or it could be Jousset managing to maintain distance with his front kick to the body, his nice question mark kick up high, which could find its mark on a slightly shorter fighter in Kevin Crosbie. And Jousset does have a better potential to pace himself in round 1 and end up taking over in rounds 2 and rounds 3. And, with the money line the way it is at minus 155 for Jousset, plus 135 the slight underdog for Crosbie, I think the bookies are seeing just that as well. So neither guy has been finished so far besides doctor stoppages, which I'm not going to count too much as cracking their chins. I think Jousset's the more well-rounded guy. If Kiefer Crosbie, even in round 1, wants to advance too quickly and recklessly, I could see Jousset getting one of those judo throws in the clinch. I could see him taking Crosbie down when he gets tired at the end of round 1 or into round 2 and round 3. So more paths to victory for Jousset, who I think could win in round 2, round 3, or by decision. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get to a moneyline bet on Jousset, but I do think he's got the more capable, more multitude of ways to win this fight. So I'll call Jousset by decision here. Featherweight bout up next between a striker versus grappler matchup. We've got the striker representing City Kickboxing in Shane Jung as he takes on a fighter who is a Brazilian grappler in Gabriel Miranda, BJJ black belt. 100% finish rate submission fighter, making his second walk to the cage. So on the Gabriel Miranda side, this guy does have kind of a shiny record at 16-6, but all Brazilian regional scene fights, not a whole lot of meat on the bone in his opponent's resumes. But he's got 15 submissions, 1 knockout, 0-4 in decision results. So if this guy can't end the fight mostly early, taking his opponents down, he really does get outstruck or just gets out-wrestled. He's one of these guys who is so confident in his BJJ that he'll pull guard, let them stay on top of him as he works for Kimuras, looks for arm bars, looks for triangle chokes, things like that. So overall, his striking looks very, very below average, and he's gotten dropped and put in trouble in a lot of fights that I've seen, even against lower-level guys. And he got TKO'd against Benoit Saint-Denis in his debut last year at UFC Paris, which is his only UFC performance so far. No shame there in losing to Benoit Saint-Denis, who is undeniable at this point, but not a good start so far. Shane Jung is a guy who has no momentum himself. He's lost his last 3 bouts straight. He's 30 years old still, and he is a kickboxer primarily with very good movement, good technique, good feints and fakes, and his game is not that bad. It's just he's had a bad run of it. His performances against guys like Rolando D and Austin Arnett, who 2 low-level guys that are not in the promotion anymore, were very impressive ones. He dictated the pace of the fight, landed like over 100 strikes in those fights significantly, and did very well. His takedown defense doesn't look all that bad either, but against guys like Omar Morales, most recently Blake Bilder, who were just able to out-hustle him, out-pressure him, and get the better of him in those fights by decision. He also got knocked out in round 1 by Ludovic Klein. So these are all decent opposition. Obviously, Blake Bilder, kind of a newer guy, still kind of green, but Blake Bilder's got a well-rounded game, and that was a competitive fight. So, I'm not going to bet on Shane Jung because he is the slight favorite here. A guy coming off of 3 straight losses, I want to have at least some sort of sniff of plus money on this guy. Like, I'm not going to bet him at minus 171, but I just think that Gabriel Miranda is so submission or bust in this fight that I just don't see it happening. And he's like kind of a fast starter as well. So if Shane Jung can survive round 1 submission from Gabriel Miranda, I think he goes on to win this fight pretty comfortably. There's probably going to be some scares early because it is Shane Jung, but I will pick him to win this fight. So give me Shane Jung. Again, he is fighting at home with his team, around him this time. Another welterweight bout up next between Blood Diamond and Charlie Radtke. So Blood Diamond, a.k.a. Mike Mathitha, this is a guy making his 3rd walk to the UFC's cage, still looking for his first UFC win. He's a kickboxer, a guy who was a former professional alongside Israel Adesanya. They were good training partners at CKB. They trained and competed together in kickboxing back in the mean streets of China. So they know each other well. That's the reason why Blood Diamond is in the UFC, because he's a 3-2 professional. Not a lot of MMA experience, but, the legend has it he has like over 100 kickboxing fights and a lot of wins. So he's a specialist in the way that we just talked about Gabriel Miranda being a specialist on the mat. This guy's a specialist in the stand-up. But honestly, his striking looks extremely awkward in the UFC cage. He keeps his hands low. He's kind of hittable on the feet. And obviously, he's always worried about getting taken down, which limits his offense. It's a lot of spinning attacks and big movements. I'm not even sure if this guy's cardio is all that good. So obviously, he got submitted in round 1 to Jeremiah Wells about 1.5 years ago. And Orion Koski is a wrestler who is not a great fighter, but able to ground and hold Blood Diamond up in the clinch for the majority of that fight to give him a decision loss. So we've got another specialist here in Charlie Radtke on the mat. He's a BJJ black belt, a BJJ coach, a competitive grappler, but his striking is also very good as well. So I like Radtke's style. He's a guy who's coming out of the CFFC promotion during his last 3 professional bouts, and he just scored a win over Raheem Forrest to win that 170-pound strap in CFFC this past year. So I like the guy's game altogether. I thought I was going to get just the jiu-jitsu guy. His striking is super powerful. 7-3 record for Charlie Radtke, 3 knockouts, 2 submissions. His left hook, his lead left hook is a moneymaker. Like, even at short range, he's knocking guys out and flatlining them cold. So I feel like that could land against Blood Diamond to counter some of his kicking action. Charlie Radtke does a good job of faking a jab and then going right over the top and slapping that short, powerful lead left hook. Look out for that strike. I think it's going to land on Blood Diamond. And Charlie Radtke's got a good takedown game as well, but you never really get a chance to see it because he dominates people so well in the stand-up that they end up shooting takedowns on him. He can kind of reverse that position, take their back, and that's how he subbed Raheem Forrest in less than one round. I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes into round one. He wrapped up an arm triangle, transitioned to the rear naked choke, got the tap quickly after. So, the obvious play is Charlie Radtke by an early submission on Blood Diamond. Just strength for strength, that would make sense. But I could see Radtke actually, potentially even knocking out Blood Diamond in this spot. So I've seen Blood Diamond in one of his pro fights, one of his few pre-UFC pro fights, get in all sorts of trouble, kind of get rocked early on the feet by a low-level guy. So I could see Radtke doing the same thing. He looks very complete. I'm not looking at anything that the bookies have not already seen because Radtke is currently a minus 350 favorite on BetOnline. The money line has been going crazy in his favor. So, I'm on the under here. I took the under 2.5 at minus 185 for a unit there. I'll probably look for Radtke inside the distance, Radtke by sub, when some other books besides BetOnline drop that. So I'm playing more of a violence play on this one. It'll cover the Mike Mathietha knockout potential, which I think is pretty low. So give me Radtke pretty confidently here to win. Lightweight bout up next between Nasrat Haqparast as he welcomes the debuting fighter by the name of Landon Quinones to the UFC octagon. Now, most people recognize Quinones from the last season of The Ultimate Fighter, where he got finished pretty early by round one finish to Jason Knight on the show. But he's only 27 years old. He's fighting out of Titan FC, where he's had his last 7-1 run in that promotion over some not so great competition, but he has shown some pretty decent skill as a southpaw striker. So he faces another southpaw striker with a lot more UFC experience, 10 UFC fights for Nasrat Haqparast, who's only 1 year older than him at 28 years old and a little bit bigger as well. So the money line is wide on this fight. It's minus 470 in the favor of the UFC veteran Nasrat Haqparast. Landon Quinones plus 370, the underdog. So what the difference here in the skill set is a lot of speed, power, and output from the Haqparast side. A lot of UFC experience against some pretty good competition. You got Haqparast coming off of a very clear, decisive win, but still kind of competitive against John Makdessi in his last fight last year. Taking on Quinones, who has not fought any notable names in Titan FC. And, he's a guy who, in Haqparast, who starts really fast and starts well when he can dictate the pace of the fight early. And Quinones, you've got a slow starter who really takes time to get into the groove of the fight, kind of range finds early and is pretty low output in round one, and then comes on strong in round two and round three. So not a good style against Haqparast, in my opinion, who's going to be the faster guy, higher output from the jump, and probably find his mark throughout all the rounds of this fight. Now, with the Haqparast side that worries me about him being a minus 470 favorite is his lack of finishing potential. He's had 10 fights in the UFC. 8 of those 10 have gone to decision, and his only knockout has come over Joaquim Silva. So, still, it's a lot better competition that he's faced than Landon Quinones, so he could potentially find the finish here. But just something to note between two southpaw strikers without a lot of finishing potential on either side, and neither guy really shows a lot of willingness to wrestle that often in the fight. So it could be a closer fight on the numbers than a money line would indicate like this, but I still think Haqparast wins. I think he could probably get it done inside the distance just due to his speed and experience here. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to touch anything in this fight. Even the overs seem like a trap because, like I said, Haqparast does have some pretty serious power with that left hand. So give me Haqparast to win here. I'll call it a late finish in this fight, but wouldn't be surprised if this goes all 3 rounds. Another lightweight bout up next between Jamie Mullarkey and John Makdessi. This is a pretty interesting matchup. At lightweight, we've got Jamie Mullarkey with a lot of advantages, including fighting in front of his home country. He is the younger man by 9 years at 29 years old. He's going to be the much bigger man at 6 foot tall compared to John Makdessi's 5'8". And, I think the better days are still ahead of Jamie Mullarkey, whereas the prime of his career is behind John Makdessi, who's been in the UFC, I want to say something like 12 years or so at this point. 18-8 record. He's a former TriStar gym member. He's a very technical counter striker, usually backpedaling on his back foot and able to strike effectively, moving backwards and just picking his opponents as they enter range. He does have some pretty good clinch weapons up close, some good dirty boxing, but he doesn't offer any takedown threat, although his takedown defense has held up pretty well. In this fight, I would say John Makdessi is probably the better, cleaner striker, and he's proven to be the better decision winner in his record, but none of the wins for John Makdessi are relevant in 2023, aside from a very close decision win he had over the debuting, I think at 21 years old, Ignacio Bahamonde. So that fight is still relevant. That fight still ages well, but that was more of like a vet lesson over a guy who was making his debut and sort of froze up in that spot. But John Makdessi at this price tag, at plus 230, the underdog, this guy does have maybe a little bit of value on his money line to play the matador in this fight against Jamie Mullarkey, who's going to be the pressure-forward, brawling style of striker, trying to grab a hold of Makdessi and hold him in the clinch, blanket him there, and wear him down in this fight. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going for Jamie Mullarkey. We talked about just the forward pressure, the output and aggression, the age advantage, the size advantage, the home court advantage. Does that warrant a minus 270 price tag when Jamie Mullarkey just messed up in his last fight as a huge favorite against Muhammadjan Naimov by knockout? He was winning that fight up until getting caught by a very powerful counter strike of, I think it was a right hook. Other than that, Mullarkey was looking decent in that fight. He's 4-4 in the UFC. I'm not going to put my money behind a minus 270 Jamie Mullarkey, but I will pick him to win this fight. I think he's got a lot going for him, and just the momentum at this point in their ages. 29 for Mullarkey, and he's got all of these things going for him here. John Makdessi would have to fight the perfect fight and catch Jamie Mullarkey at every opportunity here and win at least 2 out of 3 rounds, probably sprinkle in some knockdowns there to win those round-defining moments. I just think optically, Mullarkey moving forward and being the brawling offensive guy, it's going to look better on the judges. So give me Mullarkey to win. I think he does so probably by decision in this fight. It's been a couple of losses for John Makdessi here by knockout, Lando Venata, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. So it's been a while since he's been caught. I think he's going to be technical enough to stay safe in this fight until the final scorecard. Featherweight bout up next between Jack Jenkins and Jose Chepe Mariscal. And this is a battle between two guys, both 30 years old, both about the same size at 5'7", and they're both coming off of a successful fight in their last performance at UFC Jacksonville back in June. Now, I will say, I don't think Jack Jenkins won his last fight, which was a split decision win over Jamal Emmers. I believe that was a split decision, if not a unanimous one. Let me double check that real fast. But either way, Jamal Emmers was a big test for Jack Jenkins, proved to be pretty competitive in the striking, but I thought Jamal Emmers did the better work, and of course in the wrestling, got a lot more control time there, and should have won the fight. It was a split decision that was on June 24th at UFC Jacksonville. Very surprising for most people's account of watching that fight that Jamal Emmers lost. But either way, the other fight that Jack Jenkins won was a decision win against Don Shainis, who I think is a very low-level guy. So I'm not too impressed with Jack Jenkins. He is the minus 210 favorite in this matchup, about plus 180 for Chepe Mariscal. And back in June at Jacksonville, Chepe Mariscal made his debut against Trevor Peek. So although Trevor Peek is not a technical fighter, not a very good mixed martial artist, he is a very dangerous power threat early, and a guy who has proven to have decent cardio, like the ability to work through his fatigue is strong. Trevor Peek's durability is next level, and his determination to keep coming forward is next level. So for Chepe Mariscal, that's also a gut check to go in there and throw your best punches, kicks, knees, takedowns, try to hold down this crazy oversized featherweight in Trevor Peek. Actually, that was at lightweight. And Mariscal did a very good job. I thought his cardio held up pretty well considering all that he had to do in that fight. He avoided danger and showed that he does have a well-rounded game, coming from a judo and jiu-jitsu background, and his striking looks pretty good as well. Not to mention, Mariscal does have the better UFC-level experience in this fight between him and Jack Jenkins. Mariscal has beaten fighters like Pat Sabatini and Yusuf Zalal in some close fights, and he also has lost to Gregor Gillespie, guys like Joe Anderson Brito, Steve Garcia, and Bryce Mitchell. So he has been defeated 6 times as a pro, but they're all 2 UFC-level guys for the most part. So I take that into account in this fight. He's seen a lot. He probably won't see much he hasn't seen before in Jack Jenkins, who's got a technical striking advantage, probably heavy leg kicks. But, Chepe Mariscal trains at elevation with Justin Gaethje and some high-level opponents at Team Elevation. So he's prepared. He's been training well. He's seen a lot so far. And at plus 180, I think he can make this fight look a lot closer than that. So I'm going to go with Kape Mariscal to stay competitive in the striking early and actually take over with some wrestling in rounds 2 and rounds 3 over Jack Jenkins, who I think is fairly overrated, to be honest with you. I know he's the hometown guy from Australia. He's got this heavy leg kicking game that he's breaking people's legs, but other than that, I mean, Jack Jenkins, the fight that really just did not impress me was the one against Don Shainis in his debut at UFC 284 this year. Don Shainis, a very low-level guy. I felt like that was a fight he should have been able to finish, but again, Jack Jenkins, not a big power threat at this weight class, so although we've seen Kape Mariscal knocked out by Brito and Steve Garcia pretty badly, those are powerful strikers in round 1. Don Shainis, aside from the leg kicking game, I don't think he's that powerful. And the fact that he got taken down by Don Shainis, reversed by Shainis on the mat, and a guy like Don Shainis actually made that fight somewhat competitive, I'm just not too impressed by that one bit. So I think Mariscal can do a better job of being well-rounded here. Give me, Kape Mariscal. I'm not going to bet him yet. I think there's more money that's going to pour in on Jack Jenkins as the week goes on. He is the hometown guy from Australia, so if this goes past like plus 200, I'll probably have a bet on Kape Mariscal here. So, give me Mariscal by decision. Up next at light heavyweight, a super fun fight between Carlos Ulberg and Da Un Jung. We've got New Zealand and City Kickboxing's own Carlos Ulberg as the 6'4" professional kickboxer who is 8-1 as a pro, finishing 6 by knockout. And he's won his last 3 UFC fights straight by round 1 knockout. So looking to get another one here against Da Un Jung, who is a South Korean, very large 6'4", 29-year-old fighter with heavy hands. He's got a lot of finishes himself, 15 wins, 11 by knockout, 2 submissions. He's had quite a few UFC fights, but he is coming off of back-to-back losses at the hands of Devin Clark by decision and at the hands of Dustin Jacoby last year by round 1 knockout loss. So, it's a fun fight here. Carlos Ulberg, honestly, this guy has had some pretty easy matchups so far. He's a guy who lost his debut to Kennedy Nzechukwu by round 2 knockout, which was his first professional loss. Tired himself out in round 1 trying to get the finish on Kennedy and gassed out and got clipped in round 2 pretty badly. But he came back against Fabio Cherant, really bad fighter that fanned out of the UFC pretty quickly by decision. He also then fought Nikolai Negumereanu. He won by round 1 knockout. He faced Ihor Potieria most recently, who lost to Nikolai himself and got knocked out in round 1. And he fought Tafan Nchukwi, who is a guy who's not proven to be that successful at the UFC level either. So these 3 fighters, Tafan, Negumereanu, Ihor, just not very impressive round 1 finishes. And we still have no idea what Carlos Ulberg's takedown defense looks like. We have no idea what this guy's cardio really looks like in an extended fight. Against the Water Buffalo, Fabio Cherant, that went 3 rounds, but Fabio Cherant did basically nothing in that fight besides stand there as a kicking bag. So still a lot of questions to be answered on the Ulberg side, but he's very athletic. The guy's athletic, switches stances, crisp jab, very fast hands, and he cuts angles extremely well. You can tell he's had a very long tenured career as a kickboxer because everything is well-timed as well. So Da Un Jung, this is a guy who had his good moments in the UFC and his bad moments in the UFC. Still only 29 years old, but he does have a very nice jab, very nice heavy right cross. He knocked out Mike Rodriguez with. He does have some submission potential as well. We saw that standing choke against Kadis Ibragimov a couple years back. And his takedown defense is solid enough, but he also shows takedown offense against a guy like William Knight. He was able to ragdoll around about 6 or 7 takedowns in that fight. So he does have the more well-rounded game in this fight. The money line is at minus 270 for Carlos Ulberg, plus 225 for the underdog Da Un Jung. And I gotta say, even though Da Un Jung is on a bit of a losing streak here, I do think his game is better than people give him credit for. And at this weight class where there's a lot of volatility, I think there is some value on the Da Un Jung line. Now, I know that there's a lot of people super high on Ulberg, but again, you got to look back at his last 3 performances. Round 1 stoppages over 3 not so great guys. Da Un Jung is at least losing to Devin Clark, who's a pretty high-level wrestler at the weight class, which I think made Da Un Jung look a lot more hesitant in that fight because of that threat of that takedown. And he fought Dustin Jacoby, who, he just finished Kennedy Nzechukwu in round 1, and Da Un Jung did get caught last July, I believe it was. So I think at 29, I think at 205, I'm actually going to take this shot on the underdog here on Da Un Jung. Now, I'm not super confident. I still think Carlos Ulberg should be the favorite, but not by this much. I mean, if we got two guys who are potent knockout finishers at 205, any other weight class, I might look at Ulberg and say, look, he's the much more elite, got more elite timing, got better athleticism here, more speed, cuts angles. But at 205, I mean, it just takes a spot where Carlos Ulberg does not get the job done in round 1, gets tired, gets slow in round 2, round 3, and Da Un Jung can out-wrestle him. He could, knock him out the way that Kennedy did. There's just a lot of things that could go wrong here at minus 270 for Ulberg. So, for the community's sake, I see a lot of people parlaying this guy up at these high numbers. Hopefully he wins for everybody's sake that watches, but I'm taking the underdog here. I'm thinking this is one of the guys on the card that could be the most easy one to shit the bed as a big favorite. So give me Da Un Jung, heavy-handed South Korean to spoil the party here. I'm going to take him to win by second-round knockout. Another light heavyweight bout kicks off the pay-per-view main card. We have the hometown from Sydney fighter Tyson Pedro as he takes on the infamous pleasure man Anton Turkalj. So these guys actually size up pretty well frame-wise. Tyson Pedro 6'3", Anton Turkalj a handsome 6'4", and both guys still fairly young for the weight class. Anton is 27, Tyson is only 31 years old, but it's Tyson Pedro with all of the UFC experience. He's been in the league for many, many years now, I think dating back to 2016 or 2017. But he's 9-4 as a pro. He had that long hiatus due to a bunch of knee surgeries between 2018 and 2022, I believe it was. So Anton Turkalj, 0-2 in the league. He lost his debut to Jailton Almeida on short notice. No shame there, but he did win his Contender Series fight, and he also came up just short in his last bout this year against Vitor Petrino, where he showed a lot of toughness, ungodly durability, and he showed some good cardio as well. Both guys kind of have a similar skill set. I would say it's more refined for Tyson Pedro, who's a strong, explosive striker early, but both guys do like to grapple as well. Anton's got some good wrestling, trained at the MMA All-Stars with guys like Gustafsson. He's got some grappling experience competitively. Tyson Pedro, BJJ black belt, very strong grappler on the mat, but even though Tyson Pedro does have a lot more, I think technical experience here in his crafts, it only lasts for one round. This guy's got 9 wins, 9 finishes, and if it goes to round 2, he's proven to lose every fight that goes to decision or goes past round 1. So 9 round 1 stoppages, 4 knockouts, 5 submissions. He's a guy who beats pretty bad opponents in the UFC, but also loses to pretty bad opponents in the UFC lately as well. Upon his return from his 3-year knee surgery hiatus, he's beaten Ike Villanueva, he's beaten Harry Hunsucker. Those are just gimmies for pretty much anybody in any weight class. And he also just lost as a big favorite to Modestas Bukauskas by decision. So, I had to take the plus money on Anton Turkalj. I was one of those people who grabbed it on Saturday night, plus 115 on Anton Turkalj. I have 1 unit on him at that price tag. And it's simply because if he can survive using that durability he just showed us against Vitor Petrino, who's a hard-hitting fighter and a guy who can grapple as well, if Anton can just survive one round's worth, statistically he should win this fight. And he's an explosive guy who could get a finish early as well. So, yeah, give me Anton Turkalj here. Right now he's a minus 120 favorite. Tyson Pedro the plus 100 even money play. And I still, at this number, I still like Anton Turkalj. If I can fade Tyson Pedro here, so be it, but I am hedging this with 0.15 units on Tyson Pedro by round 1 submission at plus 850, which I grabbed on BetOnline. So, somebody's going to go out in this fight, whether it's in round 1 and Tyson Pedro gets his hand raised, or more likely in round 2, 3, or by, it's got to be a pretty sloppy fight if this goes to decision, but I think all of those areas would favor Turkalj in a late fight. So, give me the pleasure man here to finally get a first win in the UFC. Up next at heavyweight, we do have a rematch technically between Justin Tafa and Austin Lane. This took place back in June, but due to an eye poke on the side of Austin Lane, Tafa could not continue. It was a no contest, and now they run it back a couple months later. We've got Justin Tafa, who's been in the UFC 6 times, going 3-3 in those performances. A southpaw kickboxer. His brother, Junior Tafa, is now in the UFC as well, and they both have trained under the tutelage of Mark Hunt as well. Austin Lane is a guy who was on the Contender Series a couple of times, most memorably getting knocked out by Greg Hardy, but the former NFL defensive lineman did go back to the drawing board, actually improve his game in leagues like Fury FC, Combat Night. He had like 9 more pro fights. He looks a lot better than he did on the Contender Series days, that's for sure, but a big measurable advantage for the 6'6", 80-inch reach of the 35-year-old Austin Lane against the shorter, stouter guy at 6 foot tall, the 29-year-old Justin Tafa. I can't believe this guy's only 29, but he does have a weight advantage. 266 pounds, cutting down to the limit for the division is Justin Tafa, whereas Austin Lane last weighed in at about 240.5 pounds. So, look, 100% finish rate in both of their wins. Austin Lane is a guy whose kryptonite has been the wrestling. He gets taken down. Nobody wants to strike with this guy and his long, rangy weapons. They don't want to, risk getting knocked out from a position where they can't actually land back on him. So they take him down, and his wrestling is pretty piss poor. Luckily for him, that won't be tested against Justin Tafa, who's not going to land any takedowns as solely a kickboxer. So, one-dimensional fight, striker versus striker. They do have one common opponent who was the former UFC fighter Juan Adams. Now, it just took a couple of minutes in round 1 for Justin Tafa to knock out Juan Adams after destroying his legs. Now, it took 4 rounds of action for Austin Lane to defeat Juan Adams, and actually was losing that fight up until the end. Austin Lane, he does have some of the knockouts in his record are spots where, it wasn't really a knockout. He's got spots like against, I think, Eric Lunsberg, where he took him down and Eric Lunsberg's knee just, exploded or something, so it was a TKO that way. So, defensively, I think Austin Lane has a lot of holes in his game. I think he slows down and leaves, just a lot of defense to be desired. Justin Tafa is a guy who can slowly stalk you down, Mark Hunt style, very reminiscent of that guy. Stalk you down, hammer your legs with kicks, back you up to a spot where you're trapped against the cage and can't evade, and then he'll explode in with a big looping right hook, knock you out. I think that happens here in round 1. So, unfortunately, what happens in these matchups where the bookies get everybody's money, the fight happens, it's refunded as a no contest. Now they know where the money went for the rematch. So, whereas minus 175 was the price tag on Justin Tafa last time, his round 1 knockout prop was probably plus 200, plus 250. Now we're getting Justin Tafa is minus 200 as a favorite now, up to minus 220. And I think his round 1 knockout prop is probably not that great. Even on Bet Online right now, we're looking at round 1 knockout for Tafa plus 105. So, yeah, not a whole lot of meat on the bone there. Maybe some other books you can find that prop, which I think is likely. You can probably find it closer to plus 150, plus 200. So I'll be looking out for that, but give me Justin Tafa. This breakdown is no different than the last time I broke it down. Flyweight bout up next between Manel Kape as he welcomes the debuting fighter by the name of Felipe Dos Santos. Short notice fight here for Felipe Dos Santos, filling in for Kai Kara France. So that would have been a fun fight between France and Kape here. Kind of a contenders bout at the weight class, but big step down in competition for Manel Kape here as he takes on a guy in Dos Santos from the Shoot to Box Diego Lima team in Brazil, who was scheduled to be on the Contender Series this season. But at 22 years old, 7-0 undefeated record, Felipe Dos Santos gives up a lot of experience here, not only at the UFC level, but just high-level professional experience that Manel Kape has overseas and risen as well. So, explosive counter-striker in Manel Kape, good lateral movement, speed, power in his hands and his flying knees, a guy with submission and wrestling upside. I mean, there's so many ways to win this fight, which is why Starboy is the minus 370 to minus 400 favorite here. Felipe Dos Santos about a plus 300 underdog. So the scary part about that is Manel Kape at flyweight, he is such a character that he showboats, sometimes counter-strikes for too long, losing minutes at a time of a fight, just waiting for the big moment that may or may not come. So that's scary. Felipe Dos Santos, like I said, one of these blonde-haired Brazilians that carries a high guard, plods forward aggressively. His risk-taking offense is really in place of a good defense. But I mean, these guys have been actually next-level tough in the UFC. Zubaira Tukhugov lost to one of these guys by a controversial split decision, but similarly, a short-notice debut that, one of these guys from Shoot to Box won. Rolando Bedoya, we just saw representing Shoot to Box, almost beat Chaos Williams in that fight. I think that was a short-notice debut as well, so these guys have been putting up pretty competitive short notice debut spots with their blonde hair. And that is scary when you've got a minus 400 flyweight in Manel Kape. But, at 29 years old, still his best days to come, and a guy who probably will challenge for a title at this weight class. Got to go with Manel Kape here. I think he does win inside the distance, but how does he do it? Is it through the wrestling and grappling? I could see that because Dos Santos has given up a lot of takedowns. In fact, his closest fight to losing, a split decision win for Felipe, was a split decision because he got taken down like 4 or 5 times at will. But does Manel Kape have the power to knock him out? Probably, but we've never seen Dos Santos knocked out before. Maybe he does have this sort of Bedoya toughness to him. So having trouble finding ways to play Manel Kape here. Probably a parlayable guy, but just not a lot of meat on the bone at minus 400. So looking at that inside the distance prop for Manel Kape on some other sports books as the week goes on might be how I do this. But I do think he is the explosive, more talented guy. Just going to win this fight. No questions asked here. I mean, I just think he's got so many ways to win the fight through the striking or through the grappling. So give me Starboy to get an inside the distance victory. Heavyweight bout in the co-main event of the fight card. We've got Alexander Volkov taking on Tai Tuivasa. The Russian kickboxer at 6'7" and 34 years old is Alexander Volkov. With a lot of experience in Bellator, M1, and in the UFC so far, he is the minus 250 favorite over the hard-hitting, brawling, knockout artist style of Sydney's own Tai Tuivasa, the plus 210 underdog at this point. So we've got a difference between these two guys in momentum. Alexander Volkov coming off of back-to-back round 1 knockouts over Alexander Romanov earlier this year and last year over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, whereas Tai Tuivasa is on the opposite side of that. He's been knocked out in round 3 by Cyril Gane last year at UFC Paris in a headline spot, and he also got knocked out last December pretty badly in round 1 in less than a minute at the hands of Sergey Pavlovich. So not a lot of shame in either of those 2 knockout losses, but that is the story of the momentum between these two guys. A 2-win streak for Volkov, 2-loss streak for Tai Tuivasa. And the money line is in the favor of Volkov because he just has more ways to win minutes in this fight. He's the more well-rounded guy, the more technical guy, and the guy who's been proven to win a fight as it goes past the 1.5 round mark. You look at Tai Tuivasa's record. He's only 30 years old. He weighs in at the limit at 266, and he's got power in his hands. But out of his 14 wins, 13 are by knockout. And out of those knockouts, I think all of them are under 1.5 rounds, 11 in round 1 alone. So as the fight goes on, it swings in the favor of Alexander Volkov pretty drastically. And Volkov is a guy who's not been knocked out by that many people. Only Vitaly Menikov, who's a beast back in the day, like 10 years ago, knocked him out. And then, of course, Derek Lewis, infamously at the end of round 3, a fight where Volkov was winning the fight and then got knocked out by a couple of strong punches in round 3. One of the best comeback victories in UFC history. So aside from those moments landing for Tai Tuivasa, I mean, unless you're Derek Lewis, then you can beat Volkov at the buzzer. If you're a guy who can threaten some sort of takedown offense, like a Tom Aspinall, like a Curtis Blades, you can beat Alexander Volkov, which Tai has no takedowns, never even thought of taking anybody down. Or if you're a guy who can match his physical attributes, a guy like Cyril Gane, who's just as technical, just as fast, and has just about the same amount of reach as well, to reach him with teep kicks, leg kicks, jabs from either stance, which Tai Tuivasa is not doing. So Tai's path to victory in this fight is something he did against most people, kind of bully them with leg kicks, back them up to the cage, and then explode when they have their back to the cage and can't go anywhere. So whether it's the flying knees of Tuivasa against guys like Rashad Coulter or Cyril Asker, whether it's kind of like he did to Stefan Struve, who was 7 feet tall a few years back before he made his exit from the UFC. Tai Tuivasa, I think, hit him with maybe a hook to the body, got him to duck over, and then hit him with a big uppercut at the end of round 1. But Stefan Struve had a lot of durability problems, was not in his best form at that point in his career before he left the UFC. So, but that is an archetype of fighter that's a lot taller than Tai Tuivasa that he was able to knock out that way. But Volkov, very technical striker. I don't think he's going to be affected by the leg kicking game of Tai Tuivasa, and I think it's going to be Tai Tuivasa that suffers from the kicks of Volkov, namely to the body, and just gets outpointed all day long. And as his cardio wears on, he misses with big wild hooks and things like that. I think this fight goes into round 2, round 3, and I think we do see either a decision or a late finish from Alexander Volkov. So at minus 220, I took Volkov with 2 units here. You know, the consolation prize if I lose this bet is I get to see Tuivasa chugging beer out of his shoe. It's a heartwarming moment and a good way to, go into the main event. But other than that one knockout punch, that one puncher's chance, I think there's a lot of value on the money line of Volkov. So taking Volkov to win, like I said, probably a round 3 TKO or a decision win. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of the pay-per-view. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into this title fight between the reigning defending champion Israel Adesanya as he welcomes a fresh challenger to the octagon in the form of Sean Strickland for potentially 5 rounds of middleweight title fight action. So we have Israel Adesanya, 34 years old. He is 6'4" with a very long 80-inch reach. He takes on, shockingly, the younger man by 2 years. 32-year-old Sean Strickland, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. So obviously some physical advantages in the favor of Adesanya here. He's got a 24-2 record. Those 2 losses come at the hands of Jan Blachowicz at 205 and at the hands of his former rival, Alex Pereira, by way of knockout in round 5 last year. So he avenged that loss, and actually both guys, Strickland and Adesanya, did something very uncharacteristic in their last fight. They both got finishes in round 2 by TKO. These guys are largely decision winners in their careers. Adesanya got that nice counter right hand that knocked out Alex Pereira stiff in order to regain the belt earlier this year. But before that, Izzy's last win by stoppage was a round 2 knockout over Paulo Costa all the way back in 2020. So I think he scored at least 3 or maybe even 4 decision victories since then over Vettori, Robert Whittaker, and Jared Cannonier. So pretty cool to see both guys actually ending a fight in exciting fashion. For Sean Strickland, last time out, it was against Abus Magomedov. And Magomedov gassed out pretty early in that fight, and he was known to be potentially, an early finisher or bust type of guy, but a guy who has a pretty impressive resume, and a guy in Abus who probably was the more well-rounded guy than Sean Strickland, but he succumbed to that forward pressure style, the heavy boxing approach, high output approach, and at the end of round 2, Sean Strickland was able to put him away. So Strickland, a guy who largely wins 5-round headlining spots by decision, racking up strike counts and just out-cardioing and outpacing all of his opponents. So the obvious game plan here against the guy in Adesanya would be to take him off of his feet. He's the far more technical and more elusive striker. But Sean Strickland, not a guy who's known to wrestle all that much. And even when he does, it's later in the fight against guys like Uriah Hall, maybe even guys like Nasruddin Imavov. And he's not really getting much control time over these guys. So even though Sean Strickland probably does have a grappling background, like a big BJJ advantage, I doubt he's going to take the fight to the mat. And if he does, he'd probably have to do so early and establish that part of his game before Adesanya has a read on it. And before Adesanya just starts dancing around range finding from the outside and counter-striking the way he does. So in a striking for striking fight over 5 rounds, I got to favor Adesanya here as the more dynamic guy and the guy who could likely find a finish too. You've got the kickboxing style of Adesanya, good feints, good jabs, switches stances, very athletic. And you've got the more basic, slow, flat-footed style of a boxer in Sean Strickland. So obviously this is no surprise to the sports books because they see it too. He's a minus 650 favorite is Adesanya, plus 475 the underdog is Sean Strickland. So inherently, is this way too wide? Could Sean Strickland win a round or two? He's a pretty tough guy, only been knocked out by Pereira and by that spinning wheel kick of Zaleski dos Santos. I think, this will look a lot closer if it stays striking for 5 rounds than minus 700 would indicate, unless Adesanya finishes him within the first few rounds. There's no way to really play Adesanya at these odds. You maybe look towards my favorite way to play Adesanya in the past, which is Adesanya by decision. That was a moneymaker for many, many fights, and that's sitting at plus 125, I believe. But not too far off from that is just the fight going over 4.5, or the fight goes to decision is at plus money as well. Myself right now, my money is on 1.5 units on the over 3.5, which is at, let's see where I got that at. Got that at minus 115 for the over 3.5 on Bovada. I put 1.5 units on that, and a little bit scary for me because lately I've been really shitting the bed with these overs. Like the one for the Holloway fight, that guy gets an early finish for the first time ever. The last time Izzy fought Pereira, I played the overs in that fight, and they crashed on me as he got that second round TKO. So I am going to stick to the game plan here, play the over 3.5. The majority of these guys' fights go to the scorecard. So let's try it again here. Hopefully Sean Strickland stays tough, but Izzy does have a good chance to finish this fight as well. But give me Izzy by decision. Pretty dominant fight, probably a 50-45, but no way I'm touching minus 700 in Adesanya. So that will do it, you guys. That is all the fights broken down for UFC 293. Again, join me on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. I'll be having Bleed MMA on my channel for the first time ever. Should be a really fun time. That guy's super smart, been in the game for a long time, and hopefully we'll find some more ways to make money on this card. So good luck on all of your betting action, you guys. Hit that like, hit the subscribe on the way out, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.